Hey, it's Mike, coming to you from Mike's Dining Room Studios. Today I want to go over just some basic information about northern Idaho and the differences between Idaho and our neighbor to the west, Washington. This information is intended largely for people that might be considering moving here, either for a summer home or permanently because it's a great place to raise a family. This area has seen a 1 to 3% growth rate for over 20 years, with just 1 year that was an exception. I think it was 2009. And then in 2020, the summer of love, lockdowns, we had almost a 5% growth. That's largely fueled by people moving here from the West Coast. To start with, the West Coast and Idaho are pretty much politically polar opposites, with Idaho being quite conservative and the West Coast not. This manifests itself in differences in things like school choice, parental rights, and in some lesser ways that you wouldn't think of, like vehicles and appliances. Idaho is pretty much hands off. However, in Washington, coming up, all light duty vehicles sold, purchased, or registered in Washington must be EVs, electric vehicles, by model year 2030, which means in 2030 it would be a great year to be an Idaho car salesman. Now, presently, there can be no expansion of natural gas lines in Washington because they're trying to phase out all use of natural gas. And as roads go, when you cross into the state of Idaho, speed limit increases from 60 to 70, and gasoline is about 50 cents a gallon cheaper. Now for something important, crime rate. The crime rate in Idaho is quite low relative to Washington and generally all the West Coast. Here in Idaho, as I did when I lived in Nebraska and Iowa, not Illinois, I frequently just walk into a store without locking my car. Hell, half the time I leave my keys in it. But in Washington and the West Coast in general, they have very lenient drug laws, and therefore they have a problem with drugs and the ensuing homelessness that comes with it. Um, we don't have panhandlers on every corner here in Idaho, and when you do see a panhandler, they look out of place because it's a rarity. Now, quick housekeeping detail: if you would take a moment, give me a like or a thumbs up, or post a comment. You can find me in all the social media at the Northwest Realtor, the NW Realtor. Okay, now for those of you that might be considering making Idaho their home, taxes in Idaho are relatively low. It's difficult to compare all three West Coast states, but overall, Idaho's taxes are on the lower side. And Washington does have something called a real estate excise tax. That's where you pay 1.1% of the sale price of the home as a tax, up to $525,000, and then the rate begins to increase slowly. You can look it up. It's a bit of a rabbit trail for this discussion. Now, as far as real estate prices and stability, because we're a resort community and because so many people are moving here to escape the West Coast, our real estate prices are expected to increase 4.5 to 5.5% this year. So now you can look up that. Now you can look at that summer home as an investment. Um, they really go down in price. This year's kind of off to a slow start, but some of that's caused by low inventories of available houses and the winter slowdown. Last I knew, Spokane and Washington in general were expecting to lose about 4.5 to 5.5% value this year. And just a side note, Idaho's a gun-friendly state. Hunting and outdoor recreation are big parts of the Idaho economy, and it doesn't mean you're a redneck here. You do not need a permit to conceal carry, and open carry is permitted as well. And something I really like is that I honestly believe that there are more women in Idaho that conceal carry than there are men that conceal carry in the Midwest. Okay, time for a little local geography. The Idaho Panhandle is about 50 miles wide, but from Washington to Montana, there are no roads that are just a straight shot across. The central part of the state, which is not shown here, is mountainous. It has very few roads, and it's a very large wilderness area. I think the largest in the lower 48. Now, if you were traveling to this area, you would probably arrive at Spokane International. The Coeur d'Alene Airport can accommodate business jets and does, but for most of us, that's not relevant. If you're a private pilot, you might recognize the name of the field. It's Pappy Boyington Field. He was the World War II Navy ace who was from Coeur d'Alene. I didn't know that before I moved here. So, assuming you arrive in the area through the Spokane Airport, you can see that Spokane International is just outside of Greater Spokane, and it's just east of Fairchild Air Force Base, which is an air-to-air refueling tanker base that employs about 6,500 people. So it's a major it's a major employer here in the area. Spokane has a population of a little over 203,000 people, and Spokane Valley, which is actually a separate town, is it's the last town you drive through before you enter Idaho, and has a population of about 106,000. And it's about a 35-minute drive from the Spokane airport to the Idaho state line. Now, staying on I-90, going east, you come to Coeur d'Alene. Remember, you can now drive 70 miles an hour. And you see here the relative position of the small communities that make up northern Idaho. So as I mentioned, the first town across the border is Post Falls, population 44,000. Then Coeur d'Alene, population 56,000. So our town sizes are generally smaller than what you'd find at a Taylor Swift concert. But they're nice, and there really isn't anything that they don't have. The southern boundary of the town of Coeur d'Alene is the northern end of Lake Coeur d'Alene, which is nice. It's just right there. It's makes going downtown kind of cool. And the lake turns into the Spokane River going to the west. North of Coeur d'Alene, abbreviated CDA whenever you print it because typing it's a pain. It is Dalton Gardens, and it's a small community of only about 2,500 people. And it's largely in the shadow of the beautiful Canfield Mountain, which kind of defines the whole area. And it's known, Dalton Garden is known for having large lot sizes for the houses, maybe almost an acre. And it's known for having roaming gangs of deer. Seriously. North of Dalton Gardens is Hayden and Hayden Lake, parts of which are very affluent. Hayden has a population of 16,000. Hayden Lake only 2,500. These are very nice communities, and there are many houses that surround Hayden Lake, which is not a small lake. I mean, it's a very beautiful lake. See my video on waterfront versus secondary waterfront properties. It was taken on Hayden Lake. Now, there is another town of about 10,000 called Rathdrum. It's not in the picture. It's a bedroom community of the Coeur d'Alene area. Couldn't find any good maps of it. Okay, going north, next big city, and I say bigger as in a relative sense, are the towns of Sagal and Sand Point. Both have a population of around 9,000 people, so a total of about 18,000. Then farther north, Bonners Ferry. It's the last city in Idaho before you drive into the land of hockey and maple syrup. And it has a population of around 2,600. So we're talking about the area, the Panhandle area being a relatively small area. From Coeur d'Alene to Bayview, which is the first accessible point of the enormous Lake Pend Oreille, is only 28 miles. So the lakes are pretty close together. Then 45 miles from Coeur d'Alene to Sand Point, and then to Bonners Ferry, 77 miles. And the Canada border, only 103 miles from Coeur d'Alene. I want to show just how relatively small these communities are. First, you can see Post Falls, which is mostly north of the interstate and north of the Spokane River, and then Coeur d'Alene and Hayden area. And then starting in the south, Lake, get through that's the street. These are the street maps. You can see they're all pretty close and relatively small. Okay, now starting in the south, Lake Coeur d'Alene is around 35 miles long, counting the dog leg, and it's right at 50 square miles of surface area. So it's a big lake. Lake Pend Oreille is 43 miles long and 147 square miles of surface area. It's the third deepest lake in the country. So it's an enormous lake. And then further north, the last large lake is Priest Lake, which is 19 miles long and has just over 19 square miles of surface area. We have 3 ski areas within an hour and a half of Coeur d'Alene. Right on the Montana border, we have Lookout Pass that has 52 named runs. To get there, you'd have to drive past Silver Mountain, which has 67 trail. They call them trails, I don't know why. And an indoor water park. And then the largest of all is Schweitzer Mountain, north of Sand Point, 92 runs. Mount Spokane on the Washington side has 52 designated runs. So you have a lot of options for skiing within an hour and a half of Coeur d'Alene. And in summertime, they're actually they're not shut down. good for biking and other outdoor activities. And Silver Mountain has a great gondola. So it's not just a ski resort. None of them are. Now, then depending on how you count them, we have 10 area golf courses. Um, some are 10 area golf courses, and that does not include Sand Point, which has around half a dozen, depending on how you count them. So that's enough general information. What some of the main attractions to this area are. In later posts, I'll do reports on individual ski resorts, golf courses, as well as individual lakes in the area. And soon I'll start featuring some of the lake, river, and mountain properties for sale. So follow me. Let me know you're out there. I welcome your comments if they're positive. And then stay tuned to the Northwest Realtor. Follow me on Facebook and contact me anyway. And I'll put you on my newsletter list and stay in touch. More videos to come.